Hello and welcome to predictocast, the podcast where we predict a movie storyline after watching only the first 10 minutes and knowing nothing else about it. I'm Josh, and with me as always is Skinner. Hey, Skinner.
Hey, Josh, everybody.
We are continuing on with our coverage of Tamara Drewe. So correction right up front, we said her name wrong all of part one on Monday.
It would have helped if the titular character was in the first 10 minutes of the movie other than just a slight scene of her getting out of a cab.
That is true. That would have helped. So we'll issue that correction up front. And then also I want... before we get going, an apology from you because that guy is absolutely slamming a stump of wood with a sledgehammer.
He is using it to protect the fence posts that he is hitting in from having direct contact with the sledgehammer. But you are right.
Yeah, he is not a simpleton. It is not how he gets enjoyment or pleasure. It is just him putting up a fence, but he was not chopping wood as you believed he might have been, and you could not believe that I was so belligerent thinking that this man was out there smashing a piece of wood with a sledgehammer.
In my defense, you were still belligerent. But go back and listen to that episode.
Did we find out what movie he was in, Luke Evans?
I'm using quite a few, I believe. Famously,
Andy Cab, isn't that his name in this? Andy Cab,
Andy Cab. Here's a fun thing about this movie. Why is she the main character? Why is the movie named after her?
I don't know. It's based on a graphic novel, which I know nothing about, but like I don't know why she's the main character. From
looking at a quick Google image search or Google. Image search. No corrections on how we pronounce that, please. Like a lot of the scenes in this movie are like literally framed and done exactly from that book. A lot of the Jodie and Casey scenes are almost like look like they're word for word, frame by frame of them in the book. Clearly the scene that is the most important to this as far as its cover, and if you Google the movie, and
I was going to say that
the scene of her wearing her Super Mario outfit, red and blue outfit, that is directly from the book. Like it is framed the same way. You're supposed to look at her bum as she goes over the fence, and then watch her bum cheeks as she walks towards them. And wow. I get that that's kind of like the inciting incident for the rest of the movie, but like, what a weird horny movie this is.
It is pretty horny. You already brought up the two girls that we talked about briefly in part one, Jodie and Casey. And how did it make you feel the way that story turns out when one of the girls is named after your wife or has the same name as your wife and is also around the same age as your daughter?
She's specifically named after my wife. Are they supposed to be 15? I don't know.
Yeah, they're around 15. Sorry. So they're a little older than Holly.
A little older. They're a little they're acting above their age a little bit, but they're like UK comics of Sonic the Hedgehog. They're a little belligerent. They're a little mouthy compared to what us North Americans are used to. I believe they themselves, as usually, actors are older than what they're playing. Thank God for one scene, I guess, on that. But like, it's real hard that like when one of the thread lines. This is one of those thread line movies. One of the thread lines is basically this one girl is super horny for an older man.
Yeah.
And it just keeps going back to that. And I'm going to guess a lot of the graphic novels about from her perspective, because that's like, it's some kind of like her discovering something. I don't know, but it's
hard to say.
It's hard to say. She kind of gets her comeuppance in the end, but like, it's not like Tamara or Ben are like, they're just kind of nothing characters as well for being main characters. So
yeah, I will say that like, despite how horny it is. It is based on a graphic novel by Posey Simmons, who I believe is a woman, identifies as a woman, and the screenplay was written by Maura Buffini, which is also someone who identifies as a woman. So it's like it is a very horny movie, and it does do some things that kind of get creepy, but it's not like and there are moments where it seems almost male gazy, but I don't know if it's because they are writing it from the perspective of what the men would want, like the scene that you already mentioned of her like being in these like short shorts and coming in, and all the men just sort of immediately kind of fixated on her. One man in particular, but like
I think it's it's kind of like a fantasy scene for her. Like, I changed how I look, which we'll get into, and this is the payoff I wanted, and it's happening, right?
Maybe you're right. That makes sense. That would like be her thing, because she does say that just doing that changing one thing about herself, like, was the best decision she ever made.
But it's also like it's kind of has that you have that fantasy of like, I wasn't popular at X age in my hometown, but I went away and came back cooler, and now I walk in and everyone thinks I'm amazing. Yeah. And in this case, it manifests itself in the fact that she basically gives every man in this backyard a boner.
She's very similar. Like she seems like what Jodie wants to be. Like Jodie wants to do what she did, which is go away and come back and be seen as like this big deal.
Well, we have with Jodie a character who's 15 and she's mostly bored, and she's mostly discovering herself in a small town way. Like, so she doesn't know what to do with herself. She has an infatuation, and the infatuation kind of keeps her busy in a way. Like, it's not when she really does it, like explains it out, it's clearly done for comedy, and it is kind of funny. But like she has this fantasy, and like it's her trying to figure out, do I like this? Is this how I actually feel? But no one's going to take her seriously. And Tamara is a character who was kind of her and came back and got all the men she wanted. Like every like all her little dream crushes come true when she comes back, based on her one change, which is not exactly like it's. We'll get into her change, but like the joke of it being this one thing is that's not what it is, really. Yeah. I'm not sure the book is. I'm not sure the movie's trying to say that, but visually it doesn't work the way it says it is.
Yeah. We might be making it sound like it's a dour film. It's not. It's frequently pretty funny.
Well acted. Roger Allam as Nicholas is so amazingly hateable.
Oh yeah, he plays a good piece of shit for sure.
Any kind of mental picture you have of the older writing man who uses his position of influence to just constantly philandro his way around and like give big bullshit speeches that don't mean anything over wine, but he uses his old white guy power to make it seem like it's deep. Like this guy embodies that bullshit down to a fucking like the period on the sentence. Yeah. And they do a good job of when he gets kind of called out on it, he has a very baby reaction to it.
Yeah, and he also like tries to turn it back around on other people later when he's like, oh no, she's been after me. I broke it off, and she keeps hounding me about getting it back together and all this stuff.
But she's smothering asshole. Me. I can't be myself. Which we talked about in the first part. It only gets worse. Like, this is a movie that has him being caught cheating in that first time answer. We're like, oh, thank God they got it out of the way early. It keeps coming back. They make up, and then he continues to cheat on her, and he continues to be a dick to her for the rest of the movie. We have our first predictocast scene where we have a couple make up while another character in the movie takes a shit right next to them, like literally a foot away.
Yeah, I I found that pretty good.
It was pretty good. It was it was kind of. I'm not sure you could. I'm not sure you could really call that like relatable. Like, I don't think any of us has had that happen to us, but I think we all could imagine it happening to us somehow.
Well, I mean, I will say that I did once take a shit when there was a couple was breaking up outside the door, not getting back together. So that is how it was different. So I couldn't totally relate, but it was very similar.
I've had a couple break up at a table near me at a TGI Fridays. That was basically the same thing as taking a shit.
Well, you certainly took one after. How do we go through this? Because there's a lot of like crisscrossing stories, and they all kind of overlap on top of each other by the end, basically. Like, multiple character. This is one of those movies that it has all of these like sort of disparate characters that are all basically hovering around the same thing. And
I think we have to keep it. We should kind of explain it kind of chunk by chunk of characters, because not everyone's important. Like we talked about certain people at this writing retreat in part one, because this takes place at a writing retreat in a fictional city in Dorset, very small town, small boredom town.
It looks nice to me. I'd like it, I think.
I would love it at my age, but if you're young and this not my wife Jody, I see where you might be bored, but like is run by Nicholas and Beth, and it's their life falling apart thanks to Nicholas forcing it apart, while other characters are kind of circling around it, and including the titular character who has returned to town. So let's start with her, I think.
Yeah, the movie's named for her, so let's get through her story.
I want to make sure we do, because we tend to like kind of forget certain threads, and I would have pleasure in not covering every thread in this one.
Okay. I mean, I guess she is the central character because she's sort of her arrival in town does sort of spur on everything that kind of happens. So it makes sense.
It's funny because in a way she comes to town and messes up Nicholas and Beth's life, but it's already kind of been messed up because he's already had an affair with almost an identical woman.
I think that was a part of it. Like, that's why I think I got confused in the first part when we were watching it together, whether or not that was the same person. And it's because they look so similar. And I wonder if that's part of his attraction to her, although he was attracted to her, I think always, even before her surgery.
So they have they have flashbacks to her as a young person talking to him. And I was trying to figure out if that's in his mind eye what he saw or what actually happened.
I think that's what actually happened.
And I at first I thought, okay, this is just this blowhard, late middle-aged man who should not be getting all these young women, but is because of his position, getting kind of like daddy issue girls attention. But like, I thought like maybe he was like, oh, she's just talking to him and he took it as, cause he's an asshole, she must be flirting with him. But then in real time, in not flashbacks, he immediately gets her when he wants her. So I took that as, oh, she did have that infatuation with him, and she is it is her living out her fantasy.
I don't know why.
But I don't know why. But so she is a journalist, and she is returning back from London, where she does articles basically talking about her life. If you talk about in this movie writing circles, she is a blogger.
Yes.
Okay. They do not call it that at all. She journals about her life is what they call it. She's kind of like, she posts social stuff on. It's
blogging, but for like a newspaper or something, or a magazine or something.
in my local paper when I was younger had one of these articles where it was a supposedly a younger woman who was talking about her nightlife day, like almost week to week in Halifax. And being a young male, I could not understand what the fuck this was doing in the paper. It seemed completely uninteresting to me. But blogging and its popularity and everything like that, vlogging has proven that I had no idea what's actually popular.
And it also probably wasn't for you.
Once again, hey, young man, not everything has to be for you.
That was a lesson you didn't know back then.
Except for I grew up and learned fairly well not early in my life that, hey, not everything's for me. It's cool. Like other people can enjoy other things, but some people just never get that lesson for whatever reason. But they mock her a little bit for this. But she in the past, in the town, when she was back in Smallton, and this is the kind of conceit of the movie, for whatever reason, I don't see why it's important that much, is that she had a nose job while she was gone. Yeah,
she had a big nose when she was younger that apparently people thought was unattractive, but I guess it wasn't really. Like, people didn't really care, but they just thought that she looked... it seems like it seemed like some of the women thought she looked bad with her nose, and some of the men did, but then also some of the women thought she looked fine, and then some of the men thought she looked fine. So it's a weird thing. And they put her in this giant prosthetic nose in the flashbacks. And
so they play it like, oh, she's come back and she has a smaller nose, so everyone looks at her different. And she talks about it. And yes, that men are that shallow. Do not worry. But also, like, visually in the movie, she has longer hair, changing her look. She's framed different. She dresses far more provocatively and just, more modern. And she has way more confidence. And that is more important than almost anything. She walks and she has confidence in herself. And that makes a lot of difference, more than sometimes just one body feature, because we aren't technically the sum of our features piece by piece.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they had changed nothing about her except for her nose, would be one thing. And I think the movie is kind of saying this, but like, she's presented completely different than the flashbacks as far as how she's costumed and how she carries herself and her hair.
Yeah. There were some weird moments in the flashbacks where it seemed like she was from like a different century or something. Like she was working at like a Frontierland theme park, the way she was dressed.
When with her and Andy still being adults, then they kind of do a little bit for Nicholas looking a little younger with makeup, but like her and Andy are still adults at that point. They're young adults now. So it hasn't been that many years.
No.
So it was not that far in the past. It was like 2006 versus 2009.
It looked like she was just like she had stepped out of the M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, the way she was dressed in some of those flashbacks.
Right. But now she has confidence because she's changed her nose, and people have been treating her different, so she feels different. And you go to London and even without a nose job, like
even without a nose,
people. Even if you didn't have enough people, you're 1 in a million. Like, people aren't going to like, oh, you're 1/10 of the town, so we have to pick apart you inch by inch because we're bored,
So she comes back to town because the home that we see her pull up to at the end of this first 10 minutes that we talked about, she I don't know if we talked about it or not. I can't remember. She's there because that's her mom's house, and she's there to fix it back up and sell it. Because she doesn't want to be there anymore. She lives in the city. She, doesn't want to come back to this town. And through the course of being back in the town, she sort of realizes that she does actually like it there. Because she's also trying to write a book. So she's there to, work on a book about her life. That's sort of an extension of the articles that she already writes. And she's also just interested in catching back up with some of the people that she knew, because she might be able to like incorporate them into the book because they were a big part of her life, when she lived there. and she had a bit of a fling with when she was younger with the handyman Andy.
And this is where she does meet, like, so she reconnects with Andy. Andy dumped her in the past.
Yeah, I think she was planning to leave, and they had a fling. But they have a weird history because the house that her mother had was actually his family home, and he was born in it. But somehow, because he was poor, they got kicked out of their home, and his mother took it, or her mother took it. I think that's what the story is.
I think so, and he had a graphic design company, and that
I didn't understand this.
It's a weird. I think they think it's just funny to have this guy who's just the strapping handyman, and in fact, he actually in the past had something a job that is completely something you wouldn't expect him nor anyone from this fictitious village to actually ever have.
Yeah, like he says that he had a graphics company that did he sell, or that he had made enough money on to buy enough weed to keep him high for 6 years.
Something. It's very weird. He refers himself as an ultra loser at one point because of how it's all gone down.
He must have been in the military.
Well, it's very. He just, he got hurt fighting for the flag, and I mean, if he was a winner, he'd still be go. Anyway, so he has a pen, he has a pineapple, and then he made graphics with it. It's very interesting to have this character kind of at the periphery of what she's doing, because clearly the movie is saying that these two should end up together, and they do. Literally at the very last second, they spend and there's no time together with it, right?
Yeah, that I knew it was coming, but it also felt not really earned.
No, and because they don't spend they spend so much time with her going through her, especially the Nicholas affair, that they don't put enough time together with her and Andy, where you're like, oh, they've really reconnected as people, because they're just so busy with Nicholas.
Like, I feel like the way to make that work is you have her come back to town. You have Andy kind of see her. They sort of rekindle a little bit, and they kind of have a little bit of a fling, but then something happens, and she realizes that, like,
the fight
he's
comes
kind of
back.
Yeah, he's into it, but like maybe she isn't as much, or he says something to her about her being from the big city, or she went off and changed herself and now she's back, and they get into a fight and they have a bit of a row, and then they break up again, and then she starts hooking up with these other people, but you realize, oh, she really wants to be with him, and these things are all just sort of empty, and she's searching for something, and like you need that at least. I mean, I know we get the flashbacks to them like having sex or something, but it's not enough.
Instead, it's here's kind of the path of their thing. She comes back. He realizes she's pretty now. She instead hooks up with the drummer of the band that the kid likes.
Yes.
In a scene that's nuts. He walks in on them having sex. It makes him upset and horny, and he goes bangs somebody we don't know.
He goes and bangs the bartender, Zoe.
Well, she's not really a character.
Yeah, not really.
Yeah, like she's used to get him off, which is kind of a weird thing to do for what is ostensibly your good guy character who she's going to end up with.
I think he says at one point when he's talking to Glenn, he just says that that's like a fling. They have sex every now and then.
But it's also weird. So we have like other characters like Nicholas and Ben seeing him and just kind of dismissing him as like, oh, he's just the handyman.
Yeah.
Or whatever. A, because it's a small town, they all know each other, and literally he kind of works for Nicholas. But B, it's Luke Evans.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Very
like,
strapping, handsome man.
Yes, like I know like Dominic Cooper and stuff. He's very rock star pretty in this movie, and he's a very attractive man. But like for him to blow off like, oh, there's this other guy outside who's also an 11 out of 10 on attractive human being scale outside. Like literally probably at times when like one of his bigger films come out would end up in like a top 10 attractive men on the planet list. And you're just like,
what were those films? Let's go through them.
let's go through his first. Let me pull up the Wikipedia on Luke Evans, who plays Andy Capp in this movie. He was in the reimagined Three Musketeers.
Okay.
He's Owen Shaw. He's the main antagonist of Fast and Furious. But most important, let's talk about Dracula Untold.
No, but there is a moment too where he and Ben kind of square off, and like you get a good sense of how much bigger Luke Evans is than Dominic Cooper. He is huge.
I know he's got all that sledgehammer size, but he is very large.
Yeah, he's a very tall man, and he looks down at Dominic Cooper. It's very funny. So yeah, they kind of have a thing going on. So when Tamara shows up again, this kind of reignites for Nicholas his like weird infatuation with her. And
I assume his affair with the other girl is to say that he was using her as like a like he still had a thing for Tamara, and this is this girl who kind of looked like her.
I don't even think it's that. I think it's just that he's
a dick.
Yeah, well, Glenn talks about his research into Thomas Hardy, and he kind of parallels Nicholas with like Thomas Hardy liked all of these younger women, and like he was in his 60s and he was going after some 25-year-old and stuff like that. And it was like this weird thing where he just couldn't somehow like bring himself to date someone his own age or pursue someone his own age, which is just fucking, that is what happens, unfortunately, by old men, old powerful men. So I think there's definitely some of that there.
There's some of that there. We contrast it with the slow bonding of Glenn and Beth, Nicholas's wife, where like they are contemporary age and they actually have things in common, and they are slowly falling in love, and will have a very weird moment where their opportunity will come. But like, you can see where Glenn appreciates Beth for what she is, and Nicholas just sees her as like something to kind of use to have a central, an easy life away for his work, and then he can have his sexual life on the side. And it's just he's just using everyone.
Yeah.
He's the oldest guy, and he's the most childish person in the movie.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think maybe that's kind of an interesting little thing there too. It's sort of him, maybe almost paralleled with the girls with Jody and Casey. So
let's talk about Jody and Casey a bit. Jody and Casey are the two schoolgirls who usually are at like a bus stop, or they're sitting at this thing for most of the movie. And
well, I think it is a bus stop, because later when Beth walks by and says something about the bus, and they're like, "Oh no, the bus got scrapped," and they're like, "Oh well, that's too bad." so
that's it. So it is a bus stop. There is no bus, so it's a nothing stop.
Yeah.
And thus there's no need for a Scientology advertisement on it. But so we have Jody they both read the hot goss magazines, and they don't have tablets or phones to do this instead. But Jody is obsessed with the drummer of a band she likes, and she uses sexual terminology towards him in a way that tells you that she doesn't know what she's talking about, but she's just trying to figure out something. Yes. And Casey is kind of doing it because her friend is doing it, and which is what happens with kids. Jody is going to get more and more into this obsession, and it basically comes down to she just wants to feel special and have a happy moment. And Casey eventually will get like, this is too much, and I don't actually mean anything things I'm saying. I'm just trying to make you happy to hang out with me.
Yeah. And we should say that Casey is Andy's niece, which I didn't get until about halfway through the movie.
Not till halfway, because when they were overlooking at the end, she says, "Ooh, he's my uncle."
Oh yeah, when Jody says that, I bet he fucks like a train.
Yeah, like, and that was the first moment of like, oh, they like they must all know each other. Like it's such a small town. Like, of course, like they must all know the kids, and the kids must know everybody. But sometimes it's not played like that. So she's obsessed with Ben, who is Dominic Cooper's character, who's a drummer for a band, who she insists is like the real genius behind the band, and whatever. It just is this teenage infatuation, except for generally when you're infatuated with someone in a magazine, they don't live in your small town. They're not accessible.
Well, I mean, he doesn't live there. He comes there.
And
which is weird that they would have a concert in this tiny town, which seems strange. Like, it's close enough for the girls to run to and try to get in. It's
kind of weird. Maybe it's in some of the bigger town in Dorset County, but it doesn't matter. So he meets Tamara, and they have an eccentric flirt.
What was that?
It's upsetting that it worked to me. He picks up a drumstick with his toes. This is in public, by the way.
They're in her home, but yes.
They're in her home. You know what I mean? Like, it's public enough where he's not doing it in the bedroom.
Okay.
Until later.
Only beats her only drum with your feet in your bedroom, says Brian Skinner.
You need at least 3 layers of walls between you and the whole world for that. But he drums next to her head with his foot. And then he starts drumming.
He has the one stick in between his toes, and he's hitting that on like a pot up next to her. And then he's got other drumsticks that are up near her head next to other pots and bags of things. And it's like, why is this? I mean, he's keeping good time, but what does this do for her?
God, man, the outtakes from this must be amazing. And like, he's getting closer and closer as they're going for a kiss. And like, and then you realize it's supposed to be working for her.
Yeah, it is. And I wonder if, speaking of outtakes, I wonder if they had to do kind of one of the wider shots. It's like a fake foot that they have put, like they've got a fake foot on a fake leg, and they're knocking it.
Oh, if they just done it like our favorite thing in dog movies and Hot Diggity Dog, find, like, and subscribe on any number of podcast apps right now. All the best hot dog movie coverage you could possibly want. But one of our favorite things for that is when they have a dog play an instrument and they put 2 fake paws next to the dog's torso and it plays a piano. That is great. Do that for Dominic Cooper. And then he bangs her like a drum. And Andy doesn't like the sound that comes out of that.
No, he's not happy. But the girls are also not happy to see him with some woman. They keep calling her plastic because she had a nose job. They're very dismissive of any kind of reconstructive surgery or cosmetic surgery in this town.
Which is weird. It is 2010. Like that was the thing you had to bring up constantly in 1992. But it's a small town, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. They're a little behind the times.
I know, but like, hey, they had fantastic sex. Good for them.
Yeah,
it sounded like they were having a great time.
They had sex that was so good, he basically proposed to her.
It's so good, it forced Andy Capp to go have sex with somebody else. He caught it from them.
It forced him to go eat some hot fries.
And then fight with the wife. Eventually, Jody and Casey break into Tamara's house.
Yes,
to get at Ben's stuff.
Yes, which is creepy.
I thought I was really worried what she was going to do with the drumsticks.
Oh God. I mean, it's not that kind of movie, thankfully, but she does say that she wished that she could be the guitarist in the band that Ben is in. They were sort of connected before they have this big fight during the concert. That she wishes she was that woman in that dress next to him, and that he was licking her teapot lid, which is a thing I've never heard anyone say, let alone a 15-year-old.
Well, I Googled it and nothing came up.
I think that goes to your point of her just not knowing what to do, and she's just sort of making things up.
Well, her whole speech about what her perfect moment with him, if her coming in with his name in cursive on her tatted on his bicep. She does a really good job in that scene where she talked about what she's gonna be wearing, what he's gonna be wearing, and like a black shirt tight to his hard bod and black Calvin Kleins, and she like has this whole scene where like kind of creepily this adult picks her up, in his arms while she's wearing very little.
So here's what I needed for this scene to like for this whole storyline to work for me is that like Ben is not a bad guy in the movie. He's just kind of a shithead. Like
he's less of a shithead in that last scene of his, which almost threw me. Like all of a sudden he was a normal person.
Yeah, well, so I mean, because his dog dies. Spoiler alert. But I
even
think
before that, when he catches them and like in Tamara.
Oh, that's like, yeah. Hey, he is sort of normal.
Like, he's talking normal. He's like, "Hey, Tammy," and like, wait. You haven't been a normal person this whole movie. Since when can you just like be casual and call her Tammy and like this person you broke up with you have no problem with anymore? Like this whole thing, like he's like all of a sudden he's no longer Ben, he's Dominic Cooper. Like I didn't threw me off real hard.
What I needed was for her. I don't know what I really needed to make this sort of acceptable to me. Like that maybe I don't know. Maybe he like was kind of an asshole to her and she sort of learned that you can't, like you can't fawn over celebrities or you can't fawn over older men, like that she has her whole life ahead of her and that she doesn't want to go down that path because she's like mad at her dad because he cheated on her mom with someone who was younger and left them. So she's very frustrated and she wants to get out of the town and like do something with her life. But I needed some closure because at the end there isn't really any closure for her. Like she doesn't get anything. She doesn't seem to change in any way.
It's very. She gets shamed when he catches her, but like she doesn't seem to learn too much of a lesson. It's weird because also in the movie, Nicholas and Beth have a kid that you almost could have knocked this story onto.
I figure I feel like there's barely like any story with her at all.
When she showed up, I'm like, wait, they have a kid? Like, why is that nothing?
I think she has one scene that's like where she talks to her mother, and that seems to be it.
Yeah, I was absolutely blown away at that point that she had a child. But yeah, like so, like they had this scene where he picks her up in her arms. It's all this ridiculous, like childish fantasy of hers that she's trying to throw sexuality in, but like it is this this girl wearing a nightie, and then she turns and she kind of turns the screen and puts on the world's goofiest smile, and she does a great job with that. Like it cuts the moment completely into like she has no idea what the fuck she's talking about.
Yeah,
it's a weird thing to kind of because I can see telling the story of a girl who has this problem growing up with like a broken family and being bored, trying to figure out what sex is and what life is and all this stuff, and having these obsessions to try to like distract you from real life, and you're fighting with your mom and you're trying to drag your friends along, but at the same time, on screen, it's a 15-year-old girl really lusting after an adult.
Yeah,
and it's like it can only be so funny, I guess, because it's played for funny, and like the times I'm like, it's not funny.
I mean, I give it a little bit of a pass because it's not an older dude lusting after a 15-year-old girl.
No, like I was,
and he never gives her the impression that he is like even considering it in any way. Like when he meets her at the end of the movie, it's clearly like, oh, I know you're the one who's been fucking around on the emails, and you need to be better, like that kind of thing. So he sort of has this almost like, oh, you know why he changed? Because he had a kid.
Oh, is that why he? That's why
he's very different. Yes.
how much time has happened in the movie at this point?
Well, we go through almost an entire year in the course of the film, because when the film starts, it's the summer, and we roll back around to the spring by the end of the movie. So we almost get a full year, and I think that he's gone from being the weird guy. You know, in Lost, Charlie's brother is the one who's crazier at the start, and then he settles down with a kid. He's now Charlie's brother at that point. Yes, basically. Like he was dating the guitarist in the band, and then she broke up with him to date the lead singer. But I think maybe they were already pregnant at that point. Maybe they already were expecting a kid, but he didn't know about it. And then he found out that she was pregnant, and then they got back together, and then they had the kid. And so maybe that's just made a real big change for him.
I feel like he was supposed to be like some guy from Fall Out Boy or something.
He does have a bit of a Pete Wentz look to him, so that's totally possible. Who have we not touched on yet in story wise?
We haven't talked a lot about Glenn. Glenn is an American. He's trying to write, and he's kind of like the person who's always there when shit happens, and he has to kind of like watch it happen with us. He hangs around the other characters, so he kind of ties everyone together. But he is the one who's getting closer and closer to Beth.
Yeah, he's great too. Bill Camp is very good.
Everyone in this, like, this is a great cast of just screen and stage actors, like just real fucking professionals.
Yeah,
up and down this cast. He's great at it. He's very hangdog. He's not the super best guy, but he is the one who kind of knows who he is the most and at peace with who he is the most. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
And he sees the genuine value in Beth, and it's frustrating him that Nicholas is cheating on her, but also is almost braggadocious about how he what a cat he is. Like, he'll sit down for wine dinners and dinner and pop a wine, like, oh, all us writers are liars and cads because that's what writers are. And he's like, no, we should be telling the truth in what we write. And like, it's just one of those things where like guys who are assholes love to tell you that they're assholes, but real people who are assholes are the realest people in the world. It's like, no, you're just an asshole. Put a fucking mask over your nose.
Well, I was just going to say that the movie seems to take the tactic of maybe Glenn's sort of journey for righteousness is not the way, because when he, at the end of the movie, he realizes that he has to lie and he has to sort of mislead, and he sees that quote by Nicholas on the wall that said writers are liars and thieves, and he like seems to be like, well, yes, I guess I am. And is it the movie saying, yeah, I guess he is, like, or he has to be in order to make this work? Which is, I don't know if I necessarily like that, the way that ends, but
I'm not necessarily like that it had to be like that, because you had them growing closer kind of naturalistically.
Yeah, just organically. They like each other because they're both kind people who have similar interests, and he can talk to her passionately about something that he enjoys, and she enjoys listening to him. And
like, what happened, and we'll get that in a second, it kind of isn't his fault really if you talked it out and really explained it, right? But that moment felt like, okay, we need to have him make a move on her now. Because in real life, nothing's ending. There's no deadline, right? There's no credits coming up on their lives. Like, in real life, Andy and Tammy can break up with Nicholas and have this emotional break with what happens, and still end with Andy, but it could happen a year later.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're not going anywhere. There's not a black screen close. It's not Fortnite and the walls are coming in and shrinking on you and you're being squished together and you only have so much time left before you have to kill each other or fuck together, right? There's not a battle royal writer's retreat, which I am now trademarking for a nice art house game that also appeals to tweens. But
oh my God, actually, I mean, TM, but like, what if you could do like essentially Fortnite, but with writers, and you had to like write a story faster than anybody else.
Everyone, you had to get so many words or pages done before everyone else in your area before it shrinks down, and whoever's last actually has something to submit to their editor. I'm sure I could tighten it up a little bit and make the graphics better on level 5, but I think we're on our way. But like, because in real life there's no credits coming at them and it's not a story, he could wait for Beth to go through her grieving process, stay friends, which if you're not some weird internet person, that does not mean you're friend zoned for life. You can just, it could become more later. But because the credits are up, he has to lie at this point and quickly change the narrative of his life before the screen goes black and he is zapped out of existence.
Yeah.
So that kind of bothered me because it feels like the movie's saying something, but it's only saying that because the movie is a movie and not real life.
Yeah, it definitely like has to sort of wrap up the kind of dangling threads as before the credits roll. We should talk a little bit about what Jody and Casey get up to, because that kind of brings a lot of the threads together, which is that they break into Tamara's house and they get into her email, and they send an email to Ben, Nicholas, and Andy saying that they should come around to her place the next afternoon for a hot shagging. And she does not BCC everyone, so everyone sees who is on the email. And Ben gets mad about it because he thinks that Andy sent it, because he could tell that Andy had a thing for Tamara, and because she must have told him about the relationship that they had. And Beth sees the email because she is in Nicholas's email, because she does basically everything for him. She's sort of the reason. Someone says earlier that like basically the reason that his books are as good as they are is because she edits them and she makes his female characters not complete caricatures. So she sees it, and then Andy also sees it, but he thinks that Tamara must have been drunk when she sent it.
How drunk would she have to be to use that phrasing?
I don't know. I mean, probably very. Maybe not.
Maybe we don't know her. She's not in the movie as much as you think she would be.
Yeah, that is true. So there's like all this back and forth, and Nicholas hears about this email, so of course he is intrigued, and he he sees her, and she's looking for Andy, but she can't find him, and he says, "Oh, I saw the email about the shagging. I'll come by round 3." And she's like, "No, you're a prick. I don't want anything to do with you." And then she goes to the bar to find Andy, finds him kissing Zoe because he's upset about whatever. And so then the next day, Nicholas shows up at her house and she lets him in and they just fuck. And it's like,
and
what?
Then she's really in, and not only is she, like, it's not even like a thing where she has like anger at Andy sex with him, with this lumpy older man. But she is like tender with him for like the next 20 minutes. Like,
it's so weird. It didn't feel right. Like, it just felt wrong.
Because he's a dick and he doesn't do anything to even trick her into him not being a dick. And I don't know, because it's because she's the main character in name. It felt weird that she keeps, and they need to keep her from Andy until the very, very end. It just felt weird that she would continually like just quickly get into bed with him. And
yeah,
I mean, it's like, you know, it is kind of like it was a younger crush of hers, and now she can live it out, but she didn't seem to want it literally right beforehand.
Yeah, like a day prior.
And then she's really, and like she just, and then I thought like, okay, they're gonna have sex together, and then she'll like, oh, this was a mistake, let's get out. Instead, she's like just stroking his hair, and they're just in bed together, and then he's over all the time. She's kissing him in the doorway, even though it's a small town, and everyone sees him, and then Jody and Casey see them.
Yeah,
and Andy finds out about them, and then it's like, I didn't get why, other than the plot needed them to get together.
Yeah, it basically just mirrors. So once Nicholas and Tamara start sleeping together, it basically sort of mirrors what happened at the beginning of the movie, where Nicholas is saying that he's, you know, constantly busy doing research at the library and, you know, in London and things like that. So he's, you know, getting home late and he's not around as much. And so that when he's about to go to a book festival, Beth is like, oh, well, I'll come. And he's like, nah, you wouldn't like it. Or nah, it wouldn't be good for you. Like, he's so disinterested and like disconnected. Even when Glenn returns in like the spring to do more writing, he doesn't even remember who he is, or like, he's just so focused on, you know, what he's doing. And he's become this distracted asshole again. And Beth immediately sort of knows that something must be wrong, but she doesn't know exactly what.
Which is funny because they literally just went through it, and he admits that he does cheat on her and has cheated on her for a long time, and she found out through him acting like this, and then he's acting like this again, and then she has to kind of find out again.
Well, she has this weird scene where she says that like because she said it mirrors one of his books, which is that he sets up this kind of, he basically tells her he's doing things to make her think that he might be cheating on her, so that when she checks up on him, she can find out that he wasn't lying. So he says like, oh, I saw some friends, or I ran into some friends. We're going to pop over and have a drink or whatever. And then she calls them to check in on him, and he is actually there. He wasn't lying. And so now she starts thinking like, is he setting me up to believe that he is doing the right thing in order for him to be able to do the wrong thing later when I stop suspecting him? And that's exactly what he's doing. She knows what he's doing.
And it's suggested that he's been doing this almost their entire marriage.
Yeah, certainly.
And so, I mean, he has, and in real life, assholes like this do have victories, I guess you could say, and get away with this. And this stuff kind of does work, because you have human emotions, and you can't help disconnecting from people. It's difficult. But it's real hard to have her figure it out kind of on her own, through just not like catching him red-handed, but like, you know what? It seems like you're cheating. Oh, it turns out you are. I'm breaking up with you. Oh, you talked me out of it somehow. And then literally scenes later, he's doing exactly the same things, and she has to start like, is he cheating on me? Like, well, if someone you are letting back kind of on who you know has cheated on you, starts treating you the same way as when they're cheating on you, even if they're not, they're breaking the same rules.
Yeah.
So like, it doesn't have, like, he should be on such a short leash of like, you're just being a dick. That's it. Like, I'm allowed to break up with you and be angry at you for like being a dick. You doesn't have to have the full consequence of, I caught you inside a woman.
Yeah, that is, I mean, yes. So like, she finds out officially because Jody and Casey, they see him and Tamara together, and they find his car where he hides it when he goes to be with her. So they slash his tires, and then they take a photo of him and Tamara together. And they send that to Beth after Casey doesn't want to do it at first because she doesn't want to ruin Beth's life, but she changes her mind when Nicholas drives his car down the street and splashes her with water. And so she's like, that's enough. I'm going to send this over. And she sends it to Beth, who then is completely devastated and, decides to finally take matters into her own hands.
So so there's a lot of little details, but we have him at a publicity event where he's talking about his latest book, and he's just bragging about how awesome he is. I started a book in the spring. I sell it by this date. It's not so hard when you're as good as I am. And they start taking questions from the audience, and Beth ambushes him.
Yeah.
And says, so why do you always cheat on your wife? And it turns into a big fight everywhere in front of everybody. And then,
well, he says, when she asks him that, he says, because she lets me. And it's just like, oh, you fucking dickhead.
He's such a fucking, they are making sure that the scene that's coming, you have no sadness about, which is odd.
Well, how could you? Because it's a funny scene.
Because the characters do, which I get in reality they would, but it's also kind of frustrating.
Yeah, it's so heightened and kind of comical that it's bizarre how they treat it so real at the end.
Yeah, so this all happens, and then Tamara's there, and she breaks it off with him because she realizes she's doing something wrong, which she would have realized beforehand anyway, but the plot required her to break up with him here in a certain way that kind of feels like she's not a character, considering the movie's named after her. And then he throws a diaper baby fit.
Yeah, he does. He's a big child here because he realizes that she still has feelings for Andy, and she thinks that that's like he's like, oh, I see how it is. And she doesn't understand why she's with him or why she's doing what she does and that kind of thing. It's like, I mean, you are your own person. Like, I don't know. I feel conflicted by saying that like a lot of these characters don't, like, their motivations don't make a whole lot of sense. A lot of times, our motivations don't always make a lot of sense.
That
is true. It is very real in that way. But then when you end the movie the way that this movie ends, it's so comical and heightened and so like over the top compared to everything else that it's kind of weird to like have all this real emotion.
It has all this real emotion, but at the same time, she seems to go with people because the plot needs her to go with people at certain times. And he is at times cartoonishly this asshole cheating man writer. Like he's every stereotype of that character in one at times, especially as the movie goes on. They just really, really, really pile it on. And like, if the movie wasn't going to end with a real, like this really comical scene, and then have all the relationships kind of tied close with a bow in like a 3-minute span, I would be better about it, I guess.
Yeah. I get that,
because in reality, you don't have to end up with somebody because they're in the movie with you.
Well, so after all this kind of goes down, Beth is kind of having a bit of a freak out, and Glenn tries to comfort her and, tell her how good of a person she is. And like, he sort of expresses his feelings for her, and they kiss, and Nicholas comes in and is like, kind of pissed off about this.
In that way of like, I can cheat on you, but you can't cheat on me, sort of.
Yes, exactly.
Bullshit.
And this leads to sort of the big kind of climax.
So, did you enjoy their older men fight?
I did. So Glenn is kind of sitting out on this like he's sitting out on like, I don't know, it's like a big metal bucket of water, like just out in a field. I guess it's for the cows. And Nicholas confronts him about his affection, and he sort of yells at him about like, you leave my wife alone and that kind of thing. And Glenn is like, you don't give a shit about your wife. Clearly you wouldn't cheat on her if you did. And they kind of just get into this shoving match, which is pretty funny. Because nobody really throws a punch, which again, very real. You're not throwing punches or like, doing
Punching
kicks or something.
Yeah, punching in real life is actually very difficult, and you tend to hurt yourself doing it.
Yeah.
Your knuckles are made of bone; they're not made of metal or adamantium. But yeah, they just shove and shove and shove, which is just kind of funny. And Glenn's trying to say like, "Hey, let's talk it out." And the other man who's presents himself as the intellectual of the entire county, just wants to shove more. And then he headbutts Glenn. Yeah. And then does Glenn headbutt him back, or does he just bounce
No,
backwards?
I think it's just the force of the initial headbutt. Like it knocks Glenn back, but it knocks Nicholas back more, and he bashes his head on the edge of like the water bucket thing that they have in the field. And he is bleeding quite a bit. And I was like, oh shit, is he dead? Like, is this how he dies? And, Glenn is trying to like revive him, and Nicholas is kind of coming to, and he's trying to get him to get up, and so they can try to figure out how to get him, fixed up. And at the same time, there's been kind of a running subplot of Ben's dog chasing these cows and, kind of riling up the cows. And the dog is doing this again.
And they've had little characters say like how cows are actually a vicious animal and you wouldn't want to be caught up in a stamp. Like they it seems like a joke throughout the whole thing of like they're acting like these passive cows are actually dangerous.
Well, they clearly are.
Because they're setting up this. I knew a character was going to die from cow, but
I did not know that. I was very shocked when it happened.
I could tell that was coming, but I did. But when the headbutt happens and he's completely out and there's blood everywhere, I thought, oh, he's going to die, and then the cows will come by and he'll use that as a cover.
Yes, but no.
Which is not, no.
So the dog is chasing the cows, and the cows come over the hill, and they're running right towards Glenn and Nicholas. And Glenn tries to get Nicholas off the ground, but he can't, and he runs out of the way and saves himself. And Nicholas is completely trampled to death by this herd of cows. It's pretty horrific, honestly.
Yeah, like
it would be a terrible way to die.
Like Glenn covers his ears, and you get the sense that that Nicholas is like kind of not like we can't hear quite it, but like because of all the noise of the cows, but he's kind of like screaming in agony as he dies, being trampled. Yeah, right next to him, which is a very, very that's not a fun way to. There's not a lot of fun ways to die.
No,
but I'm pretty sure Nicholas assumed he dies an old man having sex with a young woman.
Yeah, his heart would give out while he's fucking a 25-year-old.
I'm absolutely sure this man wouldn't believe was his only way of going.
Yeah, basically. It is a gruesome way to go, but it's also kind of a funny way to go for this movie.
Well, they've set him up as such a villain and such a blowhard and such an asshole and so irredeemable. Like he's been given chances to redeem himself and he doesn't, and he blames everyone except for himself. And then at the very end, when presented with 1/1,000,000th of the offense that he has done to her, he is much more quick to get angry and point fingers than she ever was. Like in a way that she never attacked his lovers, but he's ready to fight someone for emotionally having a bond with somebody who he considers his property and off limits.
Yeah. The dog is shot dead by the owner of the cows. She had threatened to kill the dog earlier.
I forgot she was in the movie.
Yeah, she's not much of a character, but she shows up midway through to return the dog to Beth, and Beth is like, it's not even our dog, but she's like, I almost had to kill that thing because it was messing with my cows, and she succeeds because at the end she's standing there with a rifle and she's like, I got the beast, and then she walks off on her way, and Tamara and Beth run out because they hear the gunshot. They find Nicholas's dead body. They have this very sort of emotional thing, and are sort of dealing with what is going on. Glenn has run away. He is hidden in the bush and then run off and hid his muddy shoes so that no one would see them and know that he was there when Nicholas fell. Tamara calls the police and tells Beth that they're coming, and Beth responds by socking her right in the nose and breaking it. So I guess her old nose is back. I don't know.
Who knows? She does have She does have a few lines in the movie of like no one found me. Like I didn't get any of this male attention when I was had my old nose, but also everyone took at face value that I wasn't stupid before, and now I have to prove to people that I'm intelligent with my new nose. So, but anyways, maybe she has a third nose now, and she can somehow have a happy medium.
And Glenn tries to leave, but Andy stops him and says, you should go talk to Beth. She's asking for you. And this is when he sort of lies and is like, beasts run when they're scared. And, there's nothing you can do about that. And things happen. And she asks him to stay. And so he does. And then Andy and Tamara, who are now a couple, because he says that he's not going to. He says that it's his house. So did she already sell it
to him?
I guess. I don't know. They don't really make that totally clear.
The movie ties up very quickly. I was still kind of just sitting there, kind of irritated with It is reality about what would happen because they were married for so many years. But after all the movie is done to make him a villain and then have him trampled by cows, hoisted by his own petard, when Beth, the good character in the whole movie, sees him and literally howls in pain and distress.
Yeah.
That this character who has treated her, has basically trampled on her for her entire life is dead. She would be upset, and that's reality. But in the movie, I'm like, I don't want her to be screaming at God, upset this guy is dead.
Yeah.
I
think that, I get it. Again, I totally, we get what they're doing, but it just doesn't totally work. And then at the very end, the last scene is Jody and Casey helping Ben bury his dog. And Ben starts crying. Jody goes over to give him a hug, and then Casey snaps a bunch of photos of them together. And it feels like Jody learned nothing.
She just wanted one moment with him, and she got it from causing his dog to die, because she set in motion the entire stuff.
We didn't really talk about that. She faked being a dog lover to get him to come to town and give up his dog, I guess, because he has a baby now. It wasn't really clear why that was happening either, but it doesn't matter. But yeah, she's responsible for his dog's death. So good job, Jody.
Good job, Jody. Hope one day you get a nose job and come back to town. I don't know what the parallels are supposed to be there. Complaints aside, because this is a podcast, we're kind of breaking things down more than they need to be. This is a good, fun movie.
It's so pretty well
acted. I enjoyed wishing I was in this town rather than being stuck in this fucking country.
This town is great. It seems very lovely. They have a nice little pub. They have, a nice little town center where people are wandering around. I feel like there are like 7 people total in this town because you see no one else pretty much ever.
No, that's why it's at times when Jody, like, it made sense when Casey says, "Oh, Andy's my uncle." I'm like, well, okay, that we haven't know about his sister or brothers or whatever, but okay, fine, that makes sense. It's a small town. But at times, Jody, who also has been there her entire life, simply doesn't know any of them.
Yeah,
like, but there's only like 7 of you.
Yeah, it's very strange. There's like 2 other kids roughly their age that they hang out with a couple times, and then that seems to be the extent of the people in the town. Like I've never seen anyone else. Like it's so strange that this town is so barren.
There must be a school in town because they're wearing school uniforms.
Oh, that's true. There must be. Yeah, there must be something where you see no other kids. Like the several times that we go to the pub, there's like never anyone else there. Like it's very strange. When we go to
Jody's house, you get a feeling when she runs out and tells her mom to fuck off that she lives in a suburb because she lives in a more normal, less like country cute house, and it seems like it's a normal suburb. Like, where is that in relation to the rest of this town? Because she's clearly within walking distance of this remote area where the cows are at, which I am too, but I live in Minnesota.
Yeah, I don't know, but I just know that I want to visit there. And
yes, like the sunsets probably were beautiful there.
When I want to visit there, I want to go smash some wood with a sledgehammer.
I want some Sprite, biggest bottle possible.
Pizza bagel.
Oh God, can you imagine sitting? Picture this. We've been trapped inside 4 walls for so long. All this stuff. It's a very trying time. Putting up with other 50% of the population right now. Imagine just having a chill day at this beautiful rural retreat cabin. So much beautiful scenery, rolling hills, beautiful sunsets. Someone coming to you and like, here's your Sprite for one hand, here's your plate of pizza bagels for the other. Like, I'm good. There's so few times in my life that I can say this perfectly 100% from my deepest part of my soul. I'm good.
It looks like a lot of the movie was filmed in Salwiash. I'm probably butchering that.
Don't even try.
It's a little hamlet in Dorset. So I mean, I guess that's kind of the area that it was sort of based on, maybe. So I think I found the place where I will go visit when we can actually visit places again.
So,
Darren, tell us if we are if I am right to do that. Is that place nice? Would it be worth a visit?
And because because of who we are, because I want to end this on this because of what this podcast is. I was looking over the accolades for this movie, and at the 63rd Cannes Film Festival, it was nominated for something, and it won.
Oh,
you know what that category was?
No.
The Palm Dog Award. The nominee was Boss, the dog, and he won.
Really?
I am not making that up.
Wow.
He won Best Dog. You know what? And you know what? This is just yet another movie we've watched where the goddamn dog dies.
Yeah, the dog, Albert Clark. Remember we talked about him?
Yes, the dog, Albert Clark.
That's exciting.
I was looking at the nominees. I saw nominee Boss. What the hell who was Boss? And when I looked left, Palm Dog Award. Do you want to know who won it in 2019?
Sure. Oh, I'm gonna take a guess. The dog from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yes.
Brandy, right? Isn't that her name?
Yep.
Yes, good dog. That's very good dog acting. Yeah, well, that is the perfect place. We didn't really talk much about the dog, but yeah, the dog dies, which is very sad.
It's very sad.
So yeah, I think that's going to do it for our coverage of Tamara Drewe. Thanks to Darren for suggesting this movie for us for the month that he purchased. If you're interested in buying a month on Patreon, head over to patreon.com/predictocast. Look at the tiers we have there and see if, for whatever reason, you think it's a good idea to spend $50 to make us watch a couple movies. But until next week, when we're back with another film picked out by Darren, and I'll go ahead and tell you, we know what it is. We've already recorded part 1, and it's a doozy. It's Exotica. But until then, I've been Josh.
I've been Skinner.
And we predict you'll join us. If you like the show, subscribe, rate, and review us over at Apple Podcasts. We're on Twitter and Instagram at predictocast, and you can find our entire back catalog at predictocast.com. Our theme music is by Kyle Sledge. Find more of his work at soundcloud.com/geistmusic. To get monthly bonus content, sign up at patreon.com/predictocast. As always, thanks for listening.
The year before, Doug from Up won, which is bullshit because that is not a real dog.
No, that doesn't count.
Does not count. This is a prestigious award. How could that happen?